Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA destroyed my garden and ripped out my trees. I fought the HOA tyranny and won. TLDR. Crazy guy becomes president of the HOA and starts acting like a total dictator. When I call and complain about him acting like that, I become a target. He rips out my garden and a small tree, claiming they go against bylaws. He is out of his rights, and I take him to court and win. Then I let the whole neighborhood know what he did, and we all demand that he be forced out of his position and revote be held. The tyrant loses yet again and is forced to leave the position of power that he had enjoyed abusing. I'm just going to come right out and say it that I don't have a problem with the HOA where I live exactly. What I do have a problem with is the guy that is basically in charge of the HOA who got the job because he had a bunch of his friends voting him in. If you looked up power hungry in the dictionary, you would find a picture of this guy. The only reason that he wanted to be in charge was to just be a dictator over everyone else and act like he was better. It was absolute hell for a while as he decided to enforce what rules he wanted, when he wanted, and honestly, I think he made stuff up on the go. Of course, he never did this to any of his buddies and overdid it to anyone that he had a problem with. Now some of you might be wondering how the two of us tie together, and that is a bit of a crazy story. Me and my friends ended up on this guy's radar and we honestly weren't exactly sure how. I don't recall crossing paths with him, but my guess is that word got around that I didn't like him and was calling him a dictator with my friends. Anyway, he started trying to fine us for every tiny thing. From us not bringing our trash bins in early enough to having our grass half an inch too long. Really scummy stuff, so obviously we all decided that he was going too far, and we needed to do something about it. None of us are really the confrontational type though, so I decided to do the tamer approach and call the HOA board demanding that he step down and be replaced. My friends did the same and we hoped that maybe our complaints would change something. It did end up changing something, but not the way that we wanted. Instead of him stepping down or maybe being a little less like a dictator, he got worse. I didn't even know what was happening at first, so I will tell you just what I came home to one day later. My entire garden was dug up and even one of my small trees was removed. Left in my mailbox was a note from the HOA talking about how my garden was going against some standard and that they removed it within their rights. I was livid because I knew that there was no way they could have gotten away with this. First and most importantly, there was nothing about my flower garden that was going against HOA rules. In fact, the only garden rule in it was that any vegetable gardens needed to be in the backyard exclusively. This was flowers though, not related. Second, the proper course of action would be to leave me a note or one of those fines he loves so much. I knew this was personal. I called up my friends and found out that their yards were messed with also, and big shocker, nobody else's was. Obviously, he found out about the phone calls and wanted to show off his power trip some more. We weren't going to stand for this and instead decided we were going to sue the HOA for damages to our property. Obviously, this guy had too big an ego and was going to fight it all the way to the courts. All the meanwhile still sending us bogus fines for no other reason than to show that he can. We were just going to wait patiently until our day in court was ready and we could explain to a judge what he had done. It turns out that we were more than right when it came to him not being allowed to remove things even if they did violate the HOA. Something in the bylaws talked about how unless something was deemed an emergency and was a danger, they couldn't act at all. They also couldn't act unless a certain number of warnings and discussions were given. The example the judge used was if we had a dead tree that we weren't getting rid of and ignoring HOA telling us to, then they had the rights to come onto the property and do it. So right there he got a good telling off for not following the rules and regulations that he was in fact in charge of exerting. Second and juicier is the fact that of course him destroying our properties had nothing to do with HOA rules and was basically trespassing and destruction of property. We all won some money for damages, and I walked away with a clean $37,000 to replant my garden and pay my lawyer. My friends also got some money, but of course there was a bigger issue that we needed to take care of. Now even though he lost in court, that dictator was still president of the HOA, and even with winning against him in court, it didn't feel like enough revenge. It wasn't like any of the money came out of his pocket anyway. Plus, he was still going to be around to harass us even harder for beating him in court. We weren't going to rest until this guy was so hated he wouldn't have a choice to stay in power. You might be wondering how 3 ladies in a neighborhood could accomplish something like that. The answer is one simple word: gossip. We were going to use that same gossip mill that probably got us on his bad side to take him down. We were getting the word of what he did spread so far that not a single neighbor could go for a walk without someone asking if they heard about the HOA president trespassing and destroying a garden. We finally hit a point that everyone in the neighborhood, most of which didn't care about the HOA until now, hated this tyrant. The only ones that weren't against him were his buddies, but that was a small number in comparison. We bombarded every single HOA meeting demanding that he step down out of power. Now you can already tell based on his ego that he wasn't going to just give up and let someone else step up easily. The thing was though that even though he treated his position like a monarchy where he was the sole ruler, that wasn't true. The board could overrule him and basically force him to step down in fear of total anarchy from the neighbors. We were threatening to ignore every single bylaw and do whatever we wanted since he was just going to find people he didn't like for nothing anyway. They had no other option than to give up backing him up and tell him that he had to step down. A revote was cast and someone much more down to earth was given the job. I haven't heard anything about him since then, and the HOA is being run much more smoothly now with the new guy in charge, with more of a focus on the community working together. The last story is titled, Her 600 Pounds Life. I am guessing on the weight, but this was one of the worst situations I was put in during my time as a GM. I received a call from a few agencies, one from the county, and one from a charity org, for a handicap-accessible room for their client. I asked what accommodations were required and they simply asked for the bed to be moved to the floor, so it wasn't on a frame. I went with maintenance and took care of the request and let the desk host know the room was ready. I received a call a few hours later that the guest had arrived and that I needed to get back there and see what was going on. The desk host tried to explain, but I just couldn't understand. I arrived and checked the lobby camera and oh man, nothing would have prepared me for this. A gurney, with what looked like a wall or thick plank underneath her, and 8 firefighters and paramedics carefully moving this person through the double doors of the lobby. I was in shock. 1, that this happened, and 2, that they got this person into the room. The door frame is slightly wider to accommodate a wheelchair, but this was something else. I called the agencies back and simply stated that they really should have let us know the actual situation, as this was pretty damn extreme. I felt misled and lied to. I was told we were their last resort as other hotels declined. I asked how long she would be staying and was informed that this would go on until they found her permanent housing. And that to move her would require the same operation of firefighters and paramedics, and that would take time to coordinate. I met with the woman and her family, and they were all pleasant, but this situation went from bad to absolutely terrible within a day. The woman was incapable of anything besides speaking, eating, and defecating. The family did their best to bathe her and used a bucket to try and collect her waste. This led to destroying the sheets and the mattress with some pretty gnarly stainage. We washed these items separately and the stains wouldn't come out. We assume it was a medication thing due to the color and our failure to get the stains out. I had the joy of having to explain that unless we charged them for every ruined sheet and towel, we would have to insist they use the guest laundry and rotate the ones already stained. It wasn't ideal, but this was going to get costly otherwise. I received a call every few days to help pull the mattress back onto the box spring, as the limited movements she did have caused it to shift. So, the maintenance guy and myself would tug at the mattress from the other end to try and center her back on. I did my best to be kind, but this was all just too much. And the smells. I was in hell. I was working the evening shift when this man walked to the counter and asked for this guest. I called from the lobby and handed him the phone. After just a few words he handed me back the phone and I get a call from the room. Can you please stop down here? And do not give him any information. I asked the man to have a seat and went down to the room. I was informed that this was her ex. And that he simply was here for sex, and they weren't having it. This was getting beyond ridiculous. They asked me to get rid of him. I told them this was making me extremely uncomfortable. Since I was stuck, I had words with the man. He pleaded with me to let him see her and that he didn't need long, and yes, he was referring to sex. I asked him to stop and that at this point he was trespassing and that he needed to leave and not return. I kept in constant contact with the agencies and after 3 weeks I received the good news that they found her somewhere to go. However, they would still need a few weeks to get the required people together to move her. There were some other minor daily annoyances, and every time I had to talk to them about anything negative, it was a battle. Every day felt like I was going to have a panic attack. And then finally they left. They found a permanent place and I was beyond relieved. The entire bed set had to be thrown out. Same with the carpet. And because of the agencies that were paying, we ate the costs. By the end things weren't very friendly. I did genuinely wish them the best as they left, but I think they were tired of me and their own situation. It was quite a production moving her out and again, and I'm beyond shocked they were able to move her out of that room. I was told that they had to remove the wall of the place she was staying at originally to move her here. The last story is titled, "Steal My Car, I'll Wreck Your Life." TLDR. Couple buys car from my dealership, doesn't pay for it, tries to hide it. I go Sherlock Holmes and get them thrown in jail from previous charges and new charges. This is a story I thought you guys might like. Backstory. I am a part of a small family-owned type used car dealership. Cue used car salesman joke here. We have maybe 50 cars on the lot at any time and our main business is subprime or people with less than perfect credit. We truly want to help the people that can't afford, have the credit to buy from a new car dealership. We're actually very liked in our small community. So recently I had these customers, let's call her wife and him husband, they're early 20s. They come into my store, and I like them, they seem like a nice young couple trying to start their lives out, they have 2 very sweet little girls, and could just use a break. They have made some mistakes in their early lives and have less than perfect credit. I coach them on how to improve their credit and they seem sincerely interested in fixing it. So I bust my ass to get them a loan with the wife's mother co-signing on a nice third-row SUV. Wife is literally crying, hugging me because every other dealer turned them down. Now they are a little short on the down payment, so I take a check for the balance, and we agree I'll cash it on his next payday. Mistake number 1. But pretty common in this line of work. I forget about them until the next week when I drop the check at the bank along with other deposits. The next thing I know I receive a notice that the check has bounced. Along with a couple NSF fees attached for me, and the check comes back. It's a dollar amount that is considered a first-degree misdemeanor in our state, just under a felony. I reach out to wife to see what happened and how we can make arrangements to get this taken care of. The last thing I want to do is go after a young couple with 2 small kids. At first wife is a little shocked and insists the funds were pulled from their account and I show them the picture of the NSF check. She understands and says they can pay half in 2 weeks when she's paid again and in another 2 weeks pay the other half. I agree to this and just take them on their word. Mistake 2. A couple weeks rolls around, and I don't hear from wife or husband and am now thinking I've been taken for a ride, ignoring my calls, texts, etc. You get the point. I get a call from the bank and come to find out they haven't made their first payment either. Now with this particular bank, if the customer does not make their first payment we have to buy back the deal. Basically, we have to give the bank the money they sent us for the loan. After blowing up their phones and Facebook, they finally call me back. I get the sob story: he got let go from his job and he just started a new one and mom is going to help them get back on their feet. I go through hell and high water with the bank to make a deal that if they make their payment, they'll keep the loan, but I'm still on the hook if they miss any of the next 3 payments. Wife also tells me they'll make payments to me on the bounced check once he starts getting paychecks. So, I agree, they make their payment to the bank, and I go about my life. Until the next month comes around. I get an email from the bank saying wife didn't make the next month's payment and won't answer their calls. At this point I'm furious and ready to just go get their vehicle. They won't answer any of my calls and call mom. Mom scrounges everything in her social security paycheck to help try to make the payment for them and is short. Wife and husband tells her they'll cover the balance and of course don't pay. Bank says deal is a buyback, we need our money back for the loan within 7 days. Now the only way I can pay back their loan is if my floor plan, basically giant credit card we buy cars on, gets pictures of the car in my possession. I try to call, text, email, message on Facebook to get a hold of both wife and husband and they block me on everything. They're basically just stealing the vehicle without paying. They even blocked mom who has been trying to help them get this handled. Yes, they screwed over their own mother in this ordeal. I just want the vehicle back and move on with life. So, this is where I go pro-revenge on them. I begin by dropping the check off at the local prosecutor, and they're delighted to file charges against them. I do some skip tracing, calling family members, all of which are more than happy to help, because come to find out husband has had 7 jobs in 4 months and has burned every single family member with money they've borrowed. I find wife's father on Facebook. Father has been trying to take custody of deadbeat wife and husband's 2 kids because of how they treat them. He informs me they are staying in sister's house right over the border. We are on the state line of 2 states, remember this. I call up a repo company and even myself drive the hour to go get the vehicle. They've been hiding it in the garage, according to neighbors and repo company. I do some searching and find out they're both on probation for stealing a bunch of stuff from multiple stores. So, I of course find and call up Mrs. Probation Officer to see if she has a last known address. I then mentioned to her they're staying above the state line and bounced a very large check to me, and they're facing fresh charges in my town. She appreciates the knowledge. Now while I was up at their house one evening, I talked to one of the neighbors, who also hate them, they're always yelling at their kids and each other, and convinced neighbor to call me if they see the vehicle outside. It took one day, I get the call. I send a very large friend who lives nearby them to go get the vehicle. After many expletives, berating my friend, they hand over the vehicle. But not before finally calling me while he was there and tell me how they're going to sue and blah blah. I'm out quite a bit of money from the ordeal, but here's the best part. I just found out by living out of state they violated probation and just got sentenced to 30 days in jail from that, and they also just had their video court date, because they're currently in jail with the probation violation, with the local judge on the new charges of the bounce check. I got my vehicle back, and guess what? Deadbeat wife's father got custody of the 2 kids. Thank you for listening.